views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, when a child is removed from a parent by the Administration for Children's Services, the results can be devastating for all involved. Is the process fair? And can we do a better job? And speaking of doing better, schools are responsible for the discipline of their students. But has the discipline become too severe? It's an emotional show and one you don't want to miss. So stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. Hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, a live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at bronxnet.tv/BronxLegal. And last but certainly not least, don't forget to tweet me at David Lesh. Well, a parent who has had a child removed by Protective Services has a tough battle ahead. But you do have rights. Luckily, we have attorney Angela Burton on set to give us some well-needed information. Angela, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's take a step back. When does ACS get notice that there may be a potential issue with a child that needs to be removed from a parent?
Generally, ACS would find out about a potential circumstance when a hotline call is made. That call could be made, and it's anonymous. It could be anonymous. It could be a teacher, a school administrator, a doctor, a neighbor, a family member. Anyone who has contact with the child and who has information can call the hotline and make a report, and then ACS would become involved.
Now, does ACS give a call on the phone and say, look, I'm coming to get your child, or is there just a knock on the door? How does it work?
Generally speaking, there's no forewarning, there's no advance notice, there's a knock on the door. It might be a caseworker along with a police officer. It could be a police officer and then a caseworker may be called subsequently, but it's usually a surprise and a shock to many parents.
All right, so let's go through this. So now it's maybe about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on a Thursday, and there's a knock on the door. The door opens up. What happens? They show a piece of paper, they show a warrant, they show a notice, walk in. Tell me how it works.
So generally there's no notice or warrant, so to speak. The caseworker or the police officer may identify themselves or should identify themselves and explain why they're there. That they've come because they've received a call that a child may be in danger and may we enter. The parent does not necessarily, is not required to open the door and allow ACS in, but again, if there's a police officer there, it's probably in their best interest, generally speaking, to allow
So it's a
entry.
good idea. If it looks like there's a police officer knocking on the door,
Right.
so they don't break it down.
So they don't break it down, which has happened.
Now, do they take the child forcefully? Do they take mother and child together to a particular, halfway house or something? Where do they go?
So when you say forcefully, unless a parent consents, it is by force in terms of involuntary, let's say. The child may be taken immediately to a foster home or the child may be taken to an agency office for further processing before being placed. But the parent and the child, if the child is being removed, the parent and the child are separated physically at that point.
Now, at that point, is the parent given a list of rights or a notice or anything by ACS saying, "Here you go. This is what you have going on now. We'll see you later."
So unlike in a criminal case where you have Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent, etc., those rights are not told to you at that point in time necessarily, although they do exist. Generally, what is given to you is a notice that you have the right to apply for the return of the child, you have the right to an attorney, the date of the court hearing where a judge will look at whether or not this removal was legal and justified. So some basic information about where to go, what happens next.
Now, well, I've also been told that if it happens on a Friday, many times they can't place the child by the weekend, and the child ends up staying in the agency for a couple of days, sleeping, who knows where they're even sleeping. Is that actually true?
That used to be much more prevalent than it is today. I think there's been some strides made in terms of making sure that a child is in a more comfortable space. But again, being separated from your parent, no matter how comfortable the space is, if it's a swanky hotel, it's a terrifying situation for a child and for the parent.
And what do they do to try and ease that situation for the child, at least? Is there anything they can do, or are they trained to do anything?
I can't really speak to the training of the caseworkers and how they are supposed to handle that situation. I would hope that there are mechanisms in place to try and relieve the anxiety and the terror that the child has to be feeling. But whatever it is that they're doing, it does not mitigate the short-term and long-term trauma that child will experience in being separated from their parent in that way.
Let's talk about how you get involved here. Okay. Tell the viewers really what your function is.
Okay. In the job that I have presently, I work with a New York State agency which is designed to oversee efforts to improve the quality of legal representation for parents and others, but in this case for parents whose children have been removed or at risk of being removed by ACS.
Now, how are you involved? In other words, does the parent give you a call and say, I'm having an issue here, I think my child was taken away improperly, I'm not getting visitation? How do you get on the radar? So
I am not directly involved with clients, with the parents. My main project is to work with attorneys to ensure that they have the resources that they need in order to provide quality representation to the clients. So my job involves understanding what the needs of the attorneys are. Do they have investigators that can help them figure out what actually happened? Are the allegations that were made against the parent actually true? Do they have social workers who can assist them in understanding the entire background and dynamics of the family so that they can make sure that the parents and the children are getting the proper services that they need?
Now, who picks the attorneys? How do we even find, is there a panel? Does the natural guardian find the lawyer? How does the lawyer even come on? So
in most of these cases, the parents are entitled to a lawyer that's provided by the government for free of charge, because most of the parents that become involved in the child welfare system are financially unable to actually afford an attorney. And so when they go to court, the judge will assign an attorney. And in New York City, there's a wonderful system in place whereby the city has contracted with a number of institutional organizations that work with parents. And there's also a panel, as you mentioned, of individual attorneys that are paid by the city to represent parents in these cases as well.
Let's talk a little bit about the rights of that parent. Parent has some rights. Let's hear a few of them.
Okay. As a basic premise is that unless and until the government can show that there is some substantial risk of harm or harm being done to a child by a parent, the parent and the child have the right to remain together without undue governmental interference. So let's just start there as a constitutional matter. And that is why parents and children are entitled to an attorney when and if the government does step in to intervene into the family on behalf of a child who is suspected as being maltreated by their parent. So that's a basic right. One, family integrity, to remain together without undue interference from the government, and to have an attorney appointed and paid for by the government if indeed the government decides that there is some reason to intervene into that family.
All right, now specifically, once the child is in a home, a lot of the parents are natural parents, and I've been told, because they've contacted me, that there is an abuse that's going on in the home, a neglect that's going on inside the home. Is this from visits at the agency that they find out about these things? Where does the natural parent get this information, and do they have a right to get this information?
So when you're speaking of neglect or abuse in the foster care home, in fact, the state comptroller just came out with a report recently that talked about the lack of certain controls once a child is placed in a home that are designed to make sure that they're safe from beginning to end. And that if those controls are not in place, that leaves a child potentially at risk of being harmed in a foster care placement. And so parents can often find out this information from their child mentioning things to them, from what they notice about changes in their child's behavior when they're visiting with them, with court-ordered visitation and those sorts of things. Also, each child is assigned an attorney, him or herself. And so sometimes the attorney for the child may actually discover that there are some untoward situations going on and may be able to bring attention to that.
Tips, right? There's somebody watching, let's say right now, and they feel lost. They haven't had a chance to really discuss these things with their natural child. They want to get the child back. Give some advice, if you could.
So my main advice is work closely with your attorney, your assigned attorney, to make sure that the attorney knows everything that you know, to make sure that the attorney knows what it is that you want, and also listen very closely to what your attorney is asking you to do in order to get your child back if your child is in foster care.
Your attorney is your friend. I mean, in other words, don't be afraid to tell your attorney everything, and certainly listen to the attorney. Right. Am I correct?
Right. Your attorney is your advocate in the system. It's the only person who is there who is paid to represent your interests and your concerns. And so their job is to do what it is that to make what you want happen. And that requires you to work closely with them as well.
Is there any legislation that's coming down the pipe that seems to be changing the whole dynamic other than what the controller might be doing? Is there anything that looks like, we're going to be hearing in a year or two, something? Or?
Well, there are always proposals being put forward to improve the system. I can't point to anything specific right now with respect to what we're talking about, but we're hoping that any legislation that does come down will improve the state's ability to actually help children and parents who are in crisis and who may actually need some assistance.
And on that note, we're going to stop. But we expect you to come back and maybe discuss any future legislation.
Right.
Is that okay?
Thank you, David.
All right, well, don't worry. We will be right back. We have a little bit more to discuss, so stay with us right after this.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can stop to make sure someone is okay.
We can warn someone when their drink isn't safe.
And disrupt the situation.
We can.
Get someone the cab.
Or walk them home safely.
We can make campuses safer for our friends.
Our roommates.
Our classmates. Our fellow human beings.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can.
Intervene.
It's on us.
All of us.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund Reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at today's verdict. We now shift gears to another area of the law that deals with rights of parents as well as children, the rights of students to be disciplined properly by the schools they attend. Joining us with more on the subject is attorney Scott Limmer. Scott, when we're talking about schools at this point, and just so we're clear, we're really talking more about colleges.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Correct.
Not that this doesn't happen in high schools, and we can maybe get into that on another segment, another show.
Sure.
But we're talking about kids and colleges. Give me an example of some time where a parent may get a hold of you or a child may get a hold of you and say, I'm having a problem in college, Scott, can you help me?
Well, most of the time it starts with a phone call, and the phone call is usually about one of a small number of things. It's usually drinking or drugs, some sort of theft, or some sort of plagiarism, or some sort of sexual violence.
And
those are your big categories.
Does the child get a letter? Does the parent get a letter? Does the dean knock on the door? Listen, luckily this didn't happen to me, but I've always wondered how this comes down, the hammer comes down on the student.
You know, if it's something that's, a big to do and police are called, or obviously, the kid knows that they did something wrong, and hopefully they're smart enough to call the parent. And get in touch with me. But usually what happens is that an incident happens and a letter is sent to the parent and to the student.
Now this letter, this first notice, does it say you have the right to an attorney, your hearing is going to be in 20 days, and by the way, pack your stuff and get out of here?
Yeah,
what does that letter usually say?
Well, it'll give you notice when the hearing is. It'll give you an opportunity to go down usually and look at the evidence that they have. But as far as the rules and what you're entitled to, usually every college, what they'll do is they'll just refer to their student discipline handbook. So they don't have to list everything out, and they just say you have the rights stated in our school.
But by the way, that discipline handbook isn't sent once again with the letter, is it?
No, usually not. No.
So you're going to have to fish it out of your book bag.
The schools don't make it very easy.
They don't make it easy.
No.
Well, you gave a couple of examples. What seems to be the top one lately in terms of schools and disciplining their students?
So to answer that question, I'll say what used to be more, we'd see more. We'd see a lot of drugs and alcohol, and we'd see things where, the school wasn't looking to necessarily be that harsh, and they would try to work with the students to a certain degree. But lately, it's the Title IX sexual violence or sexual harassment issues that we see a very large amount of.
Is that student on student, in other words, or is it where somebody's got together at a party and one's claiming that one was abused, or how does it?
It could
where is it happening?
It could be anything. It could be anything from non-consensual intercourse to a non-consensual kiss on the cheek, or some sort of unwarranted advance towards the other student.
Now, was this stuff tolerated more in the past by the colleges?
Well,
I don't want to date myself, but let's say in the early to mid 80s.
One of the reasons that it's so strict now and that the policies were changed in about 2011 is because such a deaf ear was turned to things like this in the past. You would have colleges where, a girl would come and make a complaint and they would ask her if she was drinking. She'd say yes, and then they'd send her on her way. And it was just, disgraceful. And obviously, you see all these things with, athletes in the news with other students. So the federal government decided to take a stronger tack, and they put out this Dear Colleague letter in 2011 that put stricter standards on any sort of Title IX cases where if the complainant lost the case, the complainant's allowed to appeal, which is something usually that happens in something like this. They lowered the standard of proof. They lowered the standard of proof to a preponderance of the evidence, where it used to be clear and convincing. Now it's just a little more than half. So it makes it very difficult for the student.
Now, when the student contacts you, and I assume many times it's really the parent also, the parent and the student contacts you. What's the first thing you do? They get into your office. What kind of intake are you working on here?
Well, the hope is that they call me, and when the student maybe thinks that something's wrong before the school contacts them. Right. If I can get in there then and try to prevent a statement, that's always helpful, but that doesn't always happen. Usually it's once they get the notice that something happens or they get this letter, and then I get contacted. And it's weird. I've always had a criminal practice. I've always done these, but I do a lot of criminal work. And you go meet the client, you go to the office, but here, the client might be in Syracuse. The client might be in another state. There's different ways to communicate now. So usually I just do a Skype call where I get everybody together, and that's how we do intake, and that's how we usually proceed.
Now, do you then contact the college directly through letter or by phone call to see if you can work things out, or does it become very confrontational very quickly?
So that's a very loaded question. It doesn't become confrontational at all, but those things that you suggested, while you would think would normally happen in a legal case, and I'd be chomping at the bit to call the school and try to work something out, doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't work is two things. One, you are not entitled to have an attorney represent you at a college disciplinary hearing. I get hired as an advisor, and I have to instruct my client and teach my client, and kind of we get in each other's heads to actually do the hearing. Okay? And back to another thing you said, can we talk to them? All the talking is through the client to the school, and there's no, back to a criminal to make an analogy, there's no plea bargaining. So there's no clear head that could take a look at this and say, you know what, let's work this out by mediation, or let's sit down and talk about this.
Colleges don't have these mediators on hand or anybody to try and work it out?
Not for Title IX cases.
They don't.
They have to go to a hearing. And I've represented a number of students who the allegations against them have been so minor, have been so little that they've had to go through this 6-month process and be in fear of being thrown out of school, and it's scary.
All right. So at this point, you have a student who's worried that they're going to be kicked out. You're really more advising them as opposed to sitting next to them at a hearing.
Right.
What's going on, really? I mean, at that point, what kind of evidence are you trying to get to help the student use it himself or herself at the hearing, really?
So I'm trying to look at whatever evidence the school has. I'm basically going through my client. I'm writing emails. He's sending it from his email address and asking for as much discovery as we can get. We're never going to get all of it because they don't really play fair, but you really kind of have to set up for the appeal and try to show whoever's reading the appeal how unfair the hearing actually was.
How successful usually are cases like this in terms of getting the college to back off?
It depends upon the circumstances. I've had very weird circumstances with different cases. One student I represented at a school, the only allegation against him was that the girl felt pressured to have intercourse with him. And the only factor that went into her pressure was that he would have been disappointed if they didn't have intercourse. That was it. So it's so difficult to realize what he goes through for that time.
And you would figure some colleges or universities take a tougher position than others. Maybe if they're a religious institution or different things. Do you find that or not? Really?
I think more so that if they've gotten burned in the past, they are harsher than other schools. A lot of the schools are harsh now because the government's implicit threat is if you don't do this, we're going to take all the government money that we give you.
Which is very important.
Yeah, which a couple of students thrown out of a school doesn't really make much of a difference.
Do you find that the sports teams are involved in a lot of these issues?
No? Yes, but no. The sports teams get the publicity because the kids get suspended. So you find out what's going on. But it's just regular everyday students who get caught up in what's going on. New York State, they've passed a law that they're the affirmative consent law. You've heard of no means no. This is yes means yes. That at every stage of the sexual activity,
you have to ask.
Exactly, you have to ask. There has to be consent. So if you have consensual sexual intercourse, but there's no real way to show that there was consent at every step. If one of those students makes a complaint about the other, that student's got a big problem.
Yeah, plagiarism.
Plagiarism.
That was always around. It's probably always been around, students and professors. Do you see that issues where students are being told, this isn't really your work, we'd like you to leave the school.
So yes, and it's kind of scary because how easy it is to determine that kids are plagiarizing, because I don't know the names of what they use, but they run this stuff through a computer program that determines if it's somebody else's work or if it's not yours, and it's pretty easy to spot. Another interesting thing is technology and how that deals with plagiarism. A lot of assignments that are handed in digitally. So you're working on, let's just say, a Google Doc, okay? You share that Google Doc with your professor, okay? If you invite somebody on to help you with that document and they work on it, the professor is going to see that person worked on that document with you. So you don't even think about something like this, and here you go, you're serving yourself up to give them all the evidence they need that somebody helped you out.
By the way, where do we find you if we need you?
You find me, really, you just search the web for Scott Limmer, and you'll find my websites. I have websites for my criminal practice and my college discipline practice.
Before you leave, final tips that you would give to somebody who's watching right now. Somebody who might be having an issue in school, could be, I don't know, a local school, any school, around New York or whatever.
I would, if you have an issue, I would advise you to get a lawyer.
Okay.
But what I would do is I'd advise every parent who has a child that's going to college to really understand what these laws are, to understand the kind of trouble you can get in with regards to any of these things. Even social media, that's a big thing also that you have to be cautious of when you're in college.
We could spend another 30 minutes on that.
Yeah.
But we don't have enough time.
But
you're going to come back.
I would be happy to.
We'll talk about that maybe. All right, well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of tonight's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag #AskToday'sVerdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.